Today I'm joined by Matt DePorter, founder and CTO of Trinity Ops, who spent 15 years running infrastructure at scale, engineering Rackspace public cloud, and helping launch Dell Apex private cloud play. Matt's a self-described force multiplier who helps startups and SMBs move faster without lighting money on fire. In this episode, we hit two big points. First, the real reason cloud bills balloon, vendor lock-in, plus process debt, and how fractional SER, GitOps, and infrastructure as code cut costs while speeding releases. Second, how to break silos the right way. Small PRs, sensible guardrails, automated testing, clear standards, thinking UTC time and sane logging, as juniors can ship safely and seniors aren't drowned in review. Listen in and you'll learn one practical thing: how to implement GitOps. Yes, even with a lightweight stack like GitHub Action and Docker Compose to release faster, avoid lock-in, and stop paying for forgotten clusters and zombie storage. Let's get into it. Hey, Matt, welcome to the show. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, so my name is Matt DePorter. I'm the founder and CTO of Trinity Ops.dev. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm happy to be here.
Tell me about your background that led you to co-founding Trinity Ops.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in IT my whole life, basically. I mean, it started with me working on computers as a kid. My parents brought home a big old pallet of computers and from an auction and started from there. But predominantly for Trinity Ops, the origin story there is that I've been in big tech for roughly about 15 years. My time started at the university, and there I ran the department IT for computer science, and then switched over to this School of Information. It was called SISTA, School of Information Science, Technology, and Arts. Then moved to a group called iPlant Collaborative, which then rebranded to Cyverse. And their job was to provide computational resources funded by the NSF for any researcher, student, or anybody in that capacity to use computational resources for free within the United States. So I rebuilt their OpenStack cloud from scratch. I built all the automation for it, got it stood up. We had a product called Atmosphere that would allow for researchers to stand up a pre-built environment with automation. So that was cool. That was a lot of fun. Moved on to working at Rackspace. So I was on the OpenStack public cloud offering. Decent size scale, about 35,000 hypervisors all over the world. We hosted somewhere around 120,000 hosted VMs, but had roughly around 1 million customers. I was one of the most senior engineers working there. And in my time there, I just saw, I would manage everything from ingress all the way down to the bottom of the hypervisor and the network plumbing on the hypervisor. But, when you're dealing with scale and ingress from the customer side all the way on down to what customers and support staff are feeling, you kind of know how the operation works and what it looks like to provide support at all layers. And then finally, the last big influence was my time at Dell. I worked for a group called Apex, which their idea was to create a private cloud offering and then bundle their products and services that they were selling separately up the chain and provide that to sell through the Apex portal. So anyway, I've worked at small companies of just a handful of individuals, maybe 5-10 people, up to 120,000 people at Dell. But just to kind of round out this question, a lot of the reason I started it is that I just saw that cloud costs have been creeping up like crazy. Users just really have gotten put into vendor lock situations. They are struggling to find good solutions, and their MRR is just rising like crazy on their platform. So at Trinity Ops, what I started this business to solve was to provide fractional SRE and DevOps to avoid vendor lock-in and help companies, instead of paying for a high salary or a high barrier to entry to get someone to help them organize their stuff, I basically help them make that happen and do it project-based or even hourly.
I want to ask you about, and I know I kind of know the answer, but like in your mind, what are the kind of like the biggest differences, advantages, disadvantages of working at like a large organization versus being a startup?
Good question. So I would say the biggest one is the ability to wear multiple hats. When you're in a small organization, you can do pretty much anything. You can wear a ton of hats. If you're interested in something, you just go do it. A lot of the times it's just very simple, very transparent. as long as your supervisor or manager or whoever is the owner of the company is cool with it, you kind of have carte blanche. However, when you move into medium-sized organizations like my time at Rackspace, it depends on the company. Some companies are really good about maintaining that startup feel or having opportunities for you to jump around, but it's a lot tighter. You've got a lot more responsibility and things that you kind of got to stick to that make it a little bit tougher to move around, but there's still options. When I moved to Dell, it became very obvious that teams were very dug in, had their own funding pipelines, they had their own silos, they had their own product lines, they even had their own organizations that would exist. So jumping bounds was much, much more difficult. But I would say probably the biggest differentiator between small and large is, I would say, silos. You get to a point where people just get really protective over what they've built, and it's a bit of a challenge to get in there and just prove to them that you're not going to mess up their stuff, you're going to be there to help and stuff like that. So that's probably my biggest difference.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, right? I worked at a marketing agency that I think in the US there's probably 5,000 of us worldwide, depending on how many holding companies you want to count. It's got probably 25, 50,000. But yeah, I would agree. Like silos to kind of protect egos and what they built,
Unfortunately, yep.
is one of the things, one of the biggest differences. I love the autonomy in a smaller organization to just like go out and experiment with new technology and just kind of see what fits your process versus like having to do custom build out stuff or, you know, rely too heavily on like external organizations. But the one note that I had taken, that, and I try to do this every day, is be the change you want to see. So like if there's something in the organization you want to see changed, like be that at least the initiative of making that change happen. You don't have to be the end all person to get it over the finish line, but like at least start those conversations, be like, hey, look, I think this process is broken and here's why. And just lay out the, go ahead.
I was going to say, to add to your point, I think that's where the ideology of ask for forgiveness instead of permission comes in. Because unfortunately, in some cases, if you want to make it a change, you ask for it, they're just going to shut you down immediately because they're like, oh, well, this is just what we do. Like, why would we do it anything else? So sometimes it takes a little bit of initiative on your part to make that happen. But yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, like having worked in both, there's advantages and disadvantages on both sides, right? But like the flatter the organization is, I think the more you break up those silos, the more you can have an actual impact in the organization that you're operating in or creating. That's just my 2 cents on that thought.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, that's why I've kind of built my business around going after startups and stuff. I mean, I'm just passionate about the underdog too. I like giving people the ability to go above and beyond. I mean, who I am in general is a force multiplier. I mean, everything I do in my company and in my private life, I try to be a force multiplier whenever I can, be it through automation or just networking or, I mean, not computer networking necessarily, but, you know, human networking. But yeah, a lot of it is just learning how to work in those spaces and be effective. But if I had to pick, I'd rather go small because I'm kind of a mat of all trades. I really enjoy doing a bunch of stuff, and that's just me. Some people like being pigeonholed and sit in one thing and have one job for the rest of their life. I'm not that guy. So, yeah.
So you had mentioned that, you know, Trinity Ops, you go after smaller businesses from like a 15,000 foot overview. Can you explain what it is that you're doing, who you're servicing, what you said a force multiplier. You also said fractional SRE and DevOps. So give a high level of what you guys do and who you're looking to work with.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll say that I'm a modern infrastructure consultancy. And I say that just because the old model, or the people that usually comply with some sort of model, what they do is they enter into an agency and want to own everything. They want to provide a product or a service, and they want to come in and say, you pay us X amount of dollars a month and we'll be there. We want you to sign a contract. It's very formal. And if it goes poorly, they have no recourse. So my take on a modern approach to this is to do it fractionally, to do it project based or even hourly. If it's a situation where they're like, we don't actually even know what we want. We don't know what our problems are. We know there's issues and we've heard about a DevOps or SRE role before and we'd like to hire one. And then they go look at the salaries and they go, oh, yeah, that's probably not going to work. So, really, I mean, my pitch to most companies is to say, listen, like, let me take my company's wealth of experience and provide that in small chunks, or even just come in and do an infrastructure audit or a people audit in some cases. Because we had spoke before the program that a lot of the problems that people face are not necessarily technology. It's that a decision was made on a piece of software or an open source product or a vendor, or some change or quick decision was made that caused that to just be the way it is, and it's extremely difficult to unwind that, and nobody really has the time or energy to do it. So taking a step back, my consultancy is all about stepping in and partnering with companies and building a relationship, doing small projects, doing hourly, even if it's a week or two. That's enough to kind of figure out where things lie, and then jump in. I like to call it like parachute or helicopter in, help make serious impact, learn the organization extremely quickly, make serious impact, cost cutting, saving measures, and then move into saying, hey, look, I'm going to teach you guys how to do this well. Whatever I provide, I want you guys to be well equipped to do that. And then really just build documentation, do a handoff, and make sure that they're equipped to do that. But what does that look like? How does that come together? Well, Kubernetes is the leading platform people are using, but as most people find, it is immensely complicated. It is difficult to manage. And while it is self-healing and has a lot of capabilities there, it seems like for all the stability and things that you gain, you get significant complexity and cost. So how I deal with that is I use a paradigm that's kind of coming to the surface lately called GitOps and IAC. Infrastructure as code has been around for a long time. It's basically just store any change that you have to make to your infrastructure in a Git repo so that it's controlled and edited in a file. So you update the file, it updates the infrastructure. GitOps, on the other hand, is kind of that next tier where something will actively watch that code, and when a change is made, it will auto apply itself. So IAC was basically like, put it in there, save it, and then you have to go apply it strategically. GitOps kind of flips it on its head where it says any change that comes in, it auto deploys. So the strategy in that and the cost optimization there is that it helps teams release faster. It gets them more comfortable with saying, oh, wait, instead of a PR that has 15,000 lines of code that takes a month to review, it's instead 20 lines of code that someone can PR, approve, get a team on it, and release into production. A lot of also what I do has to do with how to orchestrate that. So the people side of that is building CI/CD pipelines that actually match what that development looks like, how it's orchestrated, and how it moves through the pipe. So building optimizations there can be big. And then, like we talked about before, I mean, I'm targeting small and medium-sized businesses and even startups because a lot of that takes huge amount of energy. And they may have a way to get into production, but a lot of the times it's pretty common that software gets released to production and then they're editing it in production. There's just small changes that can make big impact, but it helps to have somebody that knows how to operate in production, knows what it looks like to make change, and how to gatekeep in a way that doesn't gatekeep progress, but adds healthy boundaries to make it such that anybody who wants to release software can. And that actually even lowers the barrier to entry where a junior developer that comes on board has the opportunity to make a change. Whereas before, if it's this big monolithic PR or a big change, any small delta there can wreck it. So anyway, I know I kind of went on a little bit, but it's hard to talk about, what impact we can make as a company and what it looks like for cost savings, because most people think cost optimization is, oh, how low can you get my AWS bill? How low can you get my Azure bill? Well, it depends, really, because it depends on how you're using that infrastructure. I mean, half the time it's, oh, we forgot about that cluster we stood up 3 months ago. It's been churning on logs and metrics and infrastructure spend, and we just forgot to delete it. Or we have this big Glacier storage or, S3 buckets that have been sitting around forever. We just forgot about and didn't delete. So yeah, stuff like that.
It's funny because like you mentioned a couple of things there, right? Like being able to kind of help smaller organizations overcome that barrier of entry when it comes to releasing more quickly and in a more methodical approach. But you also had mentioned that like one of the things that small businesses do is they wear a lot of hats. So like partnering with a business and understanding them very quickly to be able to create impact is helping to kind of understand who's wearing what hats and how you can leverage their expertise. Because right, like I wouldn't call myself a technical founder, but I know enough that I can look at a block of code and understand what it is that I'm looking at, assuming that
Right.
I've got some background context on what it is. So yeah, I mean,
But I'm sure you probably wouldn't feel comfortable like hitting the approve button on a PR and letting it go to production. I mean, you could read it and add your 2 cents, but that's just it. Half the time it's, what also happens is you have senior developers that are doing everything and they get overloaded with 30 PRs and they just don't have time to go through them. And because everybody's so terrified to touch anything all the time, it lands on one person and they're just hammering out a bunch of stuff and it's easier to miss. I mean, I've been in a very large organization where I've managed hundreds of thousands of lines of code that run in production in data centers all over the world. I mean, at Rackspace, we had 6 regions all over the world. And, a seemingly small one-line change actually broke the deployment for every single one of our products. So it's tough to know the impact. And I really think kind of a teaser into some of the AI stuff that we're going to talk about, but that's where AI can help. But I think another thing to kind of point out in this space that's kind of interesting is that a lot of people think they have to have this like huge infrastructure in order to do what I'm proposing. A lot of the times it's just a few GitHub actions or GitLab pipelines, or even just having a reproducible environment on your laptop. Like a lot of people kind of undervalue things like Docker Compose, that you could run a fraction or a subset of your infrastructure on your laptop and actually do local testing. Testing is a huge one, right? If you don't have automated testing at every level of what you do, it's so funny how often somebody will make a change to fix a bug that was a critical break fix, but undo a handful of other changes that were elsewhere. And it's hard to know what those things look like. Also, it's pretty common that somebody says, oh, well, this test is outdated. We don't need this anymore. And they axe it. And then, a couple months later, they're like, oh, yeah, our latency's ticking up, or well, this whole thing's black holing, oh, that's really weird. So people get comfortable with disabling all the tests instead of making good tests that actually validate what you're actually wanting. So
it's funny that you mentioned testing. I worked for an organization that was relatively small. They operated a CRM platform, and our dev team sat in Europe, and the date stamps that they were using were European day stamps. So you can see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
We had a lot of
Time
clients
zones are
here in
hard,
the
man.
States.
They
So
suck.
there was a couple of times where we took down the entire production system as a CRM platform because we didn't do any sort of regression on date stamps, and it killed the system.
Yep. I mean, even time zones. I can't tell you how many times I've looked
Yeah.
at a company that built the time zones around the corporate headquarters or the founder's location, and they're operating internationally, and just people not keeping track of it. I mean, if you're on a call 4 o'clock in the morning, you've been online for 18 hours straight, it's pretty easy to mess up time zones or look at a log and think, wait, when did that happen? Wait, what's happening here? Like, oh, wait, that was a long time ago. Oh, wait, no, that's happening now, So I think there are small strategies like using UTC time zone and using standard epoch or whatever time mechanism that you want to have, but even setting simple standards of time zone, the way logs are built, the way time formats exist, or even logs, and having definitions of how they should exist those little tiny things can add up to a lot. It also reminds me of a common practice that, some developers like, well, I was debugging this code, so of course I would turn on, 10V verbosity on all of my logging, and pretty soon you're pumping a couple terabytes worth of logs into your logging observability model. It just takes everything down, and or people just forget to turn it off, and you've got debugs everywhere and you can't actually figure out what's wrong. So yeah, it goes into a lot of weird things that people don't necessarily see intuitively, but that's one big thing as an SRE and a DevOps, is that role in particular is so odd, because a lot of people just think, oh, it's just some guy that acts as a gatekeeper, or oh, he only cares about that uptime metric, or SLO, SLA, SLI, right? But the truth is, it's actually more about working with the development teams hand in hand and saying, listen, we are here to enable you to make what you have better. And our changes that we're requesting is not to make it so that you're unable to do what you have to do. Just keep in mind that we are helping you get to production in a better way. And then we maintain and act as a gatekeeper in the sense that DevOps and SRE folks often have a strong development background. So we can look at code and we can see what's good and what's bad. When it runs in production, we know how to do that and scale that. A lot of the development software that's built isn't set or built to scale at all. So that's where we can really step in that role and make significant impact. And then I think lastly is that I just can't tell you how many times I've had an extremely talented developer. I mean, just some of the best people I've known, they write incredible code. They're always on top of it. But sometimes they'll be like, oh man, I'm trying to do this. I can't figure this out. We'll just be sitting together in a voice call and I'm just like, hey, what are you working on? Tell me what's going on. And they'll say, well, I'm working on this. I'm not sure. I'm kind of struggling with this. Or, well, I've got this release coming up and I'm really stressed about it. There's a lot of times where just my insight as a DevOps or SRE, where I'll say, wait, what if you did X, Y, and Z instead of what you had planned? Or, hey, instead of this big database schema migration, how about you just make a couple of changes and then you don't have to do all that? Or instead of having to delete entire database, how about you just skip it and we can worry about it later so that you have a rollback? That can be really valuable. Just small things like that, just a different frame of lens and a different point of view can be huge.
I mean, reframing anything has a huge impact, whether that be, critical business systems or just reframing a question so someone understands it better, like in the moment, right? Like that has such a big impact. And I ask people to do it for me all the time, be like, okay, I think I understand what you're asking me, but can you just phrase it in a different way so I make sure that I understand like where you're trying to take this questioning or what it is that you're trying to explain to me, because I think I have it, but I need more context. I do this with my wife all the time. She'll ask me a question and I'm like, I need more words. And then she'll reframe it for me.
Yeah, my wife half the time, she's like, man, you just got a new job. Now it's going to take me 6 months to figure out what you do. But but even still, I mean, you don't have to have a full technical depth to understand big changes in processes. I'm going to throw something out there that may be a bit weird for people to hear, but culture matters. Culture is huge, not only in where you live geographically, but also company culture, even team culture has huge impacts to things. And I say that because ideologies are deep ingrained. Like what I noticed is that we would work very frequently with offshore resources, and some really talented people, did some incredible things, but the cultural differences actually ended up in a way that I didn't expect. And the way that it showed up is that when I get off of work, when I stop working, I go do weird things. I work on cars, I build solar, I have chickens, we'll go build servers or do things that are after hours, but are similar to what I'm doing, or, I'll spend time with friends, I'll be in the community, I'll volunteer, I'll do stuff like that. And what kind of surprised me is that culturally, a lot of offshore folks are so desperate to get a position. Once they've achieved it, they only care about vertical rise. And that's not a bad thing. It's okay. Like everybody deserves to work hard, or not deserves, but everybody wants to work hard and be their best ultimately. But what I noticed is that it limits the ability for people to be well-rounded. And what I mean by well-rounded is the ability to look at things from a perspective that the average person wouldn't necessarily see. We get so stuck in our technology paths or our decision trees or our methodologies that we don't stop to think, hey, wait a minute. When I was collecting eggs in my coop, I realized, oh, wait a minute, they're doing this versus that. You know, there's these weird insights that come up when you're at work. Like, hang on, my chickens were doing that. I wonder if that relates to what is happening here. I know it's an insane example, but sometimes just having that outside perspective of, you know, or being a mechanic, like working on a car, you know, you think, oh my gosh, this job was going to take me half an hour and I've been at it for 6 hours and I'm still not done. The insights that you gain from that is things like, leave it better than you found it. Don't build it so complicated that the next person that comes along can't even understand what you wrote. It kind of comes out in kindness and collaboration. And it actually goes to what we were talking about silos earlier, that I am a huge proponent of breaking down silos and allowing people to work in more of a community setting, because it doesn't build those barriers. It doesn't build arrogance. It doesn't build just even barriers to entry to work together. So I think all of those things are really important.
What do you think is the biggest, when it comes to organizations that have silos, that you have gone in and kind of successfully reamped their mindset to work more communally? What is that biggest hurdle or domino that has the biggest impact long term?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's tough, and it honestly it depends on the team. It depends on what they're doing. It depends on a lot of factors. But these days, especially, money is tight. People are worried about losing their jobs or they're unhappy, and a lot of the bad things that come out at work are kind of silent. People don't really know that they're there, but they're there. Also, it's just human beings. Like, we forget that we work with people that are actually trying to do a good job, and they really don't intend to hurt other people. That's not their goal. I'll be honest, there are a few people that are kind of built that way. I mean, let's just not kid ourselves here. But in general, I think most people are trying to do a good thing. So nobody likes to be told that they're doing something poorly. Nobody likes to feel dumb. Nobody likes to feel like what they've built or their baby that they've put together is ugly. Nobody wants to know that. So I think the way that I've found that makes that approachable and can make impact in an organization is to just sit with them and say, hey, look, show me what you built. Show me how it works. Show me what you're trying to solve for, and let them be proud. I mean, we all want to be proud of what we built. And I think the way you do that is you step in and you learn. You listen and you learn and you understand. You don't come in with some, you know, agenda or initiative that you try to throw at them. It's just not going to happen. But what I would say that the way that you can deal with them in those circumstances is to do this with a lot of different silos. Take really good things that teams have done and introduce that to other teams to level up the entire organization. When there are times where you're like, okay, that could do better, just say like, hey, you know, tell me about this section of code or this infrastructure, or, you know, why did you guys decide to do that? Because honestly, more often than not, they're like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about this. It was horrible. We had to make all these changes because of something or other, and we can't undo it. We've wanted to get rid of it forever, and we can't. That opens the door to an opportunity where you can step into that and say, hey, you know what? Let me help you. And they go, wait, why would you help me? And if you do that, that is a huge olive branch that you can lean on, and it really breaks that silo down and builds a relationship from the start. It's a little bit of a sacrifice on your end, and you're gonna do something for someone that may impact your ability to perform, but I promise you it's worth it.
Yeah, it's funny because I was having a conversation earlier today of trying to establish a better partnership with a client of ours, of like, hey, let's set up like a monthly meeting so we're just having conversations that in the spirit of partnership, that we're coming together and building something together. And then the challenge question back to me was like, what's in it for them? They're quite busy. I'm like, well, it's a good question. I don't necessarily have the answer right now, but I would assume that by us partnering more closely with that person, we are getting stuff out of it, but they are also getting more and more out of the reporting that we're generating for them. So like that, I would think that that's the so what of that equation.
It's funny you mentioned that, because that's something I'm challenged with a lot in my type of organization and in the role that I do. Because a lot of people are like, I don't really want to talk about my pipeline today. Like, I've got this release coming up, or if you're a founder or CEO, co-founder, leader, whatever it is, I gotta got these KPIs I got to keep up with. There's other things I have to do for the business that if I don't do this, we don't pay the bills, right? One thing that's been interesting in the tech space that's been really, really helpful in an unexpected way is workshops and tech talks. It's a way for you to present an idea or a technology or solution, or even just an opportunity to talk about something, and record it and allow people to show up and ask questions and see how it goes. Because what's interesting about it is that I have found that some of the most profound and meaningful conversations I've ever had started with a workshop or a tech talk. Because they're starting to think like, wait a minute, you're doing something differently than I've always done it. That's interesting. I'm now understanding the value of it. So instead of trying to pitch it to somebody or get buy-in, just show them. Just say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. And if they're not interested, they're not going to watch the video. Or a lot of the times also, it's really important to post them and make them available to people. And if they get bored, they drop out after a minute or two or stop playing the video. But there's also been times where I've watched tech talks that are a year, 2, 3, 5 years old in some cases, that I'm watching as part of my onboarding onto a project. And I hear them talk about something and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've never thought of that before. So it's interesting. There's different strategies. It depends on the situation. It's obviously, highly subjective, but I think there are some significant things that can be yielded from that. And really just opening the door of a conversation. I mean, a buddy of mine was also talking about the differences between like Scrum and Waterfall and Agile. And what's funny is that people put Agile and Scrum together, and they're not actually intended to be together. In fact, people adopt Scrum and call it Agile, and it's not. Scrum was always designed to be a relationship between a vendor and a customer, or a customer and a contractor, as a way to time box and to have strategic meetings to check on progress. But if you're internal to an organization, it actually adds a very clunky and time-boxed approach that kind of robs you of all the joy of what you're doing. And it's interesting. I mean, to an external agency, that's really important. Even if you're just doing it within the organization, but across teams, that can be valuable to have those standing meetings. But I just kind of wanted to mention that, because that kind of goes into what you're talking about. A lot of these things can change with culture, but my thing is I want to move fast, but I want to have control. I want to be able to have joy in the things that I enjoy and push away the things I don't want to enjoy. We all have to do things that we don't want to do. But how do we do that in a way that makes it exciting for us to show up to work every day?
Brings us into it segues us nice into a next question for you, which is, what's the biggest challenge that Trinity Ops faces in the next year, and what steps are you taking to overcome that?
Yeah, good question. As a founder, it's hard to chase everything. I've got a million ideas. I've got solutions to everything. I just simply don't have the time in the day. I just can't do it all. So I think a lot of it is being a bit more strategic, just kind of taking a step back and, kind of looking at myself from the outside, looking at what the company wants to do, what my clients want, what the economy is doing, what the industry is doing. AI is changing things in a lot of different ways, and a lot of people are very fearful of it. I think it all depends on who is in control of it and how it's being developed. I think that there's actually a bright future with AI, and I think it it accentuates the force multiplication aspect. So the can't chase everything problem for me and my challenges going forward, I'm actually going to automate a lot of that as much as I can through AI. I'm going to use tools to automate things. Anything that I have as an administrative challenge, I'm going to try to automate. Anything that I do to build code, I'm going to use AI more. I mean, I'm not going to vibe code like all the cool kids these days, but I will use AI to develop software and to speed up my processes. I think there's a big opportunity there, and I think that's going to be huge. But on that note, I think I'm going to double down on what I stand for. I mean, Kubernetes, GitOps, observability, cost savings. I'm going to build tools that make that possible on any platform. I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm on AWS. I'm going to build everything AWS. No, I'm actually going to build it for everything and make it where, yes, you can deploy on AWS, but if their costs go up, I can just lift and shift you somewhere else. It doesn't matter. And if you start owning a small piece of the infrastructure, it sounds weird and that's almost self-hosting, but it opens the door to other things and significant cost savings, believe it or not. But also, I think also just I bring a wealth of knowledge and capability. I have a lot of great experiences. I've had an amazing set of peers and mentors over the years. And part of how that happened was, watching videos, doing training. So I'm also going to put some significant time into that. I'm going to start building a bigger online presence. Life got busy, things have happened, and I started doing that years ago. I'm going to get back into that. I'm going to write a lot of Substack articles that turn into short form content, do a little bit more social media interviews like this, for example, but just ways to disseminate information and just prove that I am about open source and sharing with the community. But I got to make money at the end of the day. So I'll probably paywall some of those things just because AI has made a big impact there, where AI has stolen a lot of people's IP. And it's tricky and it's unfortunate, but it is becoming more of a thing that things are becoming more oftenly kept behind paywalls.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot in that bit. Not in a bad way, right? Like there's so many good things in there, right? I 100% think that all founders should be doing some sort of social media engagement, outreach, being able to create a persona around themselves as well as their brand. It was kind of like how I got started doing this. Being a podcast, even having a show, was just asking questions and then turning around and being on TikTok, which sounds ridiculous. And I haven't posted anything there for quite a while, but that was really my start, and just keeping myself accountable in the public. So I was kind of doing this build in public type thing. So yeah, I'm with you there.
Has its risks. Yeah.
Right. I love
tricky.
I love leaning into AI for automation. There are so many great tools out there when it comes to automation and just being able to provide repeatable tasks to things that aren't human, as well as there's some great tools out there like Cursor that will allow you to lean into AI when it comes to coding.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so many really good things there. Matt, you've been great so far. At the end of each one of all of my shows, I've given every guest 90 seconds to plug anything that they're passionate about. So that could be Trinity Ops, that could be anything. So without further ado, the next 90 seconds are yours.
Cool. I wanted to comment one last thing, is that I wanted to mention something about failure. Failure is a hard thing for people to understand, and failure stops them from doing things. I would encourage people just to fail, just to build a good relationship with failure. There's a video that I watched a long time ago called Finished Not Perfect. And I would encourage people to just do something to completion, no matter how bad it looks or whatever those things are. I really do take that seriously in my realm. But yeah, so let me give you a 90-second pitch. Trinity Ops, we're focused on simple, reliable, repeatable infrastructure. We're freedom focused. And I mean that a little politically, but really, it's about just having freedom to do what you need to do in your business. What does that look like? How does that operate? Not being vendor locked in, just the freedom to do what you need to do as a business. We want to help you do that. But also, it's not just about us building a bunch of stuff and plopping it on your lap and having you deal with it. We actually offer tutoring. We offer mentoring. We offer classes, workshops. If there's an area of focus where you have a member of your team that shows promise, but you don't have the time or the resources to do it, we can actually do a project where we do the project and mentor that person along the way. I love teaching. It's a big part of who I am and what I do. And then lastly, just about intellectual property. There was a tax code change that happened that I think is actually the trigger for all the layoffs that have happened. And our company is pivoted around that. So we don't produce IP that you have to pay us for. We help you generate the IP, which in that tax code actually allows us to be written off as a service. So if you're struggling as a company and you have huge IT expense or you have internal staffing that you can't afford anymore, but you need somebody to come in and step into that role, I'm not saying we're going to be a scab worker here. It's more about we will help your team members that are already there stay there. We want to keep that there, but if you need some help and need to get over that hump or get that lump of the snake through, let's do that. We're here to partner with you. And lastly, I'm just excited about technology. I want to help people build cool stuff. I want to help startups, no matter what your field is or how things work. I want you to do what you do better. And I want it to be done in the easiest way possible, that's easiest to maintain and operate. There's nothing worse than paying for something or paying somebody for something and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so complicated, I can't even use this. We really work hard to make sure that that's not the case. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the plug. It's trinityops.dev is the name of the website. We're on LinkedIn. We're on pretty soon other social media platforms. And feel free to reach out to me personally. I'm happy to sit down and have a conversation with you.
Awesome. Matt, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.